for my friend Senator Harkin of Iowa and Senator Durbin from Illinois, but I must respectfully disagree with them and rise in opposition to the bill and ask for support of an amendment that I am offering, which is being co-sponsored by a number of senators. And I want to thank Senator Leahy, Senator Wyden, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Schatz, Senator Murphy, and Senator Hirono for their support for this amendment. Madam President, I also want to thank the largest educational organization in America, the National Educational Association, for their support of this amendment, and thank the American Federation of Teachers for their support of this amendment. Madam President, the truth of the matter is that if the bill on the floor is passed without amendment, it would be a disaster for the young people of our country who are looking forward to go to college and for the parents who are helping them pay their bills. The job of the United States Congress, it seems to me, is to improve upon the dismal situation we face today in terms of student indebtedness and college affordability. These are major crises in this country. Millions of kids leaving school deeply in debt, parents borrowing at high interest rates to send their kids to college. We have a crisis. This bill makes a bad situation worse, not better. Madam President, I ask my colleagues to support the amendment that I have offered, which would provide a 2-year sunset to this bill, an approach which would prevent student interest rates from soaring and allow us the time, through the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act, to deal with the issue of student indebtedness in a constructive, long-term manner. This issue is too important not to go through a hearing process, not to go through a committee, and I hope that we will pass my amendment, supported by 8 other senators, which will sunset this bill in a 2-year time and allow us to take advantage of the relatively low-interest loans now and prevent student interest rates from soaring into the future. Madam President, the very sad truth of the matter is that in a number of ways, our government, Congress, White House, is failing young Americans today at all ages. We have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. Almost 22% of our kids live in poverty. I think every working American understands that our child care system is a disaster. If you are a working class mom or dad in Vermont, or I suspect any other place in this country, it is hard to get the quality child care that you need, so that many, many kids today, because of inadequate child care from 0 to 3 to 4, enter kindergarten or first grade already years behind where they should be intellectually and emotionally. We're failing our young children, but we're also failing our teenage young people as well. Today, Madam President, the unemployment rate for high school graduates is close to 20%. That's the official rate. Real unemployment, counting those who have given up looking for work and are working part-time when they want to work full-time, is even higher than that. What does that mean for millions of kids who graduate high school? They can't get a job their first year out of school, their second year out of school, and their third year out of school. What does this mean for their entire lives? We are not dealing with that issue. I passed an amendment as part of the immigration bill to provide 400,000 jobs over a 2-year period for young people. That's a start. We've got to go a lot further than that. But by and large, we are failing working-class, middle-class young people today who are desperately searching for jobs. For minority youth, for African-American youth, Madam President, if you can believe this, the official unemployment rate for ages 16 to 19 is over 43%. Over 43% African-American young people unable to find jobs. That is unacceptable. Madam President, our goal must be to make sure that the youth of this country, if they graduate high school and want to go out into the workforce, are able to get decent jobs, or else, if they choose to go to college, to be able to afford to go to college. And to make sure that our young people do not end up on street corners doing drugs, not in jail, not in self-destructive activity. That is our job, to make sure that those who have the ability and capability are able to go to college and others are able to get meaningful work. And frankly, we are failing in both of those areas. And when we do that, we fail not only the young people of this country, but the future of this country, because the future, by definition, is with our young people. Madam President, all of us know that we live in a highly competitive global economy. If this country is going to succeed economically, we need the best educated workforce in the world. Unfortunately, compared to much of the industrialized world, we are doing very, very little to make that happen. In June, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, released its annual snapshot on the state of education in developed nations. The report showed the United States is losing ground to other nations that have made sustained commitments to funding higher education opportunities. We are losing ground, and the legislation on the floor today, which will result over a period of years in a strong likelihood that interest rates for student loans will go up, making it harder for low and moderate income kids to go to college, will only accelerate those losses. Madam President, the United States once led the world in college graduates. 30, 40 years ago, we led the world in the percentage of our people who were college graduates. And in fact, as a result of that, today, those people between age 55 and 64 in the United States still lead their peers in other nations in the percentage with college degrees, about 41%. So if you are between 55 and 64, compared to the rest of the world, that age group has the highest percentage of people who are college graduates. Tragically, over the years, we have lost substantial ground. In 2008, and this is a very, very sad story indeed, something that should concern every member of Congress and every American, the same percentage of Americans aged 25 through 34, the same percentage of that younger group has a degree compared to the older group of 55 to 64. What does that mean? What it means is that for the last 30 years, every president, every governor, every member of Congress, virtually every parent in America has said to our young people, the world is changing. Technology is exploding. A high school degree no longer will do it if you are going to make it into the middle class. That's what everybody has said for the last 30 years. But 30 years later, nothing has changed. The percentage of Americans who have a college degree today is no higher than it was 30 years ago. And the result of that is that other countries have significantly surpassed us in terms of the percentage of their younger people who now have college degrees. In terms of percent of college graduates, we lag behind Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Ireland, Israel, Japan, South Korea, Luxembourg, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. In other words, when we were once first in the world in terms of percentage of college graduates, we are now 15th in the world. Now, how do we compete in a global economy if we have descended from first to 15th in the world in terms of people with college degrees? And that is why in the immigration bill, you have people coming to the floor and they say, Americans aren't educated. They can't do these high-tech jobs. We need people from all over the world to come in to do that work. Well, I don't agree with that. But that's the argument out there. Our people don't have the education. Does anyone believe that in any serious way the bill on the floor today is beginning to address the issue of making it easier for kids in this country to go to college? And the answer is nobody does. Because according to CBO projections, interest rates are going to go up, and in fact, it is going to be harder for families to send their kids to college. And I'll get into that in a moment. Madam President, the other very important point to be made, and I think a lot of people don't understand this, but according to the Congressional Budget Office, the United States government is making huge profits from college loans. In fact, according to the CBO, the estimate is that the U.S. government will make about $184 billion in profits over the next 10 years. So what do we have? We have a middle class which is disappearing. We have poverty at a level as high as it's been in the last 60 years. We have millions and millions of families struggling to be able to send their kids to college. My parents didn't go to college. I was the first, my brother and I were the first in our family to go to college. Millions of families in the same boat. And what is the United States government doing now? We are helping to balance the budget, not by asking multinational corporations who make billions of dollars a year in profit and pay nothing in federal income taxes to pay their fair share of taxes. No, that's not what we're doing. We're saying to working class and middle class families, oh, you want to send your kids to college, you want to borrow money from the government, well, over the next 10 years, we're going to make $184 billion in profits off of you. Let me go on record as saying I think that that is a very counterproductive idea. It is a dumb idea. We have got to get out of the business of making profits off of struggling families who want nothing more than to be able to send their kids to college. Madam President, let us be very clear about what this legislation on the floor would do. According to the CBO, and I fully agree, I don't know what interest rates are going to be tomorrow, next year, you don't, nobody does. And the CBO is by no means infallible. But the CBO and most economists believe that we are leaving this period where interest rates have been historically low. Are they absolutely right? I don't know. Could they be wrong? Quite possibly. But that is what the CBO is estimating. This is what the CBO says. The CBO says that the 10-year Treasury note on which this entire legislation is based is now at 1.8%. 2014 will be at 2.57%. 2015 at 3.35%. 2016, 4.24%. 2017, 4.95%. 2018, 5.2%. Everybody has got to understand that what this legislation is about is basing student loans on a variable interest rate. Interest rates go up, student loans go up. So let's look at what will happen with student loans under this legislation. The good news is that because interest rates are low now, for the next few years, the student loan programs, the subsidized Stafford, will be 2013 at 3.8, 2014 at 4.6, 2015 5.4, 2016 6.2, 2017 7%, 2018 7.2%. That's for undergraduate. For the graduate Stafford loans, under this proposal on the floor today, in 2015, 6.9%. In 2016, 7.8%. 2017, 8.5%. 2018, 8.8%. For the PLUS loans, those are for parents who are helping their kids, 2015, 7.9, 2016, 8.8, 2017, 9.5, 2018, 9.8. Now, does anybody really believe that in a time when families and young people are having an enormously difficult time paying for college, that these interest rates make any sense whatsoever? They do not. They are going to put an increased burden on working families and young people. Today, the average student graduating a four-year college leaves school $27,000 in debt. If you're paying interest rates of 7% or 8.5% for graduate school, there is no doubt in my mind that that indebtedness will rise. Furthermore, not only is it a question of families and young people struggling with enormous debts. Now, we did, on my website, I asked Vermonters and people all over the country to tell me what the impact would be on their lives of student indebtedness. And we heard just enormously painful stories. I mean, from people who say, you know what, my husband and I wanted to have a baby. We can't have a baby right now because we don't have the funds. We're paying off our student debts. People who are going into professions that they really did not want to go into because they just have to make a whole lot of money to pay off their debt rather than doing what was the love of their life, what they studied to do. So what we have here is a bad situation today, which, if the CBO is correct, will only make that situation worse. Madam President, what my amendment does is say, okay, it's not my preferred option. My preferred option would be to do what a majority of the members in the Senate voted to do, is to freeze interest rates for another year at 3.4% while we come up with a long-term solution. My Republican colleagues, as they do on virtually every piece of major legislation, chose to filibuster that bill, and we needed 60 votes, and I think we only got 51. A majority spoke for the American people, for the young people, for working families, but we couldn't get the 60 votes. That was my preferred option. But this approach, at least, and what my amendment would do, is to say, okay, between 2013 and 2014, we will keep interest rates fairly low, not as low as I would want it, 4.6 for undergraduate Stafford, 6.1 for graduate, and 7.1 for the PLUS program. Not ideal by any means, but it is a lot better than what will likely take place in years to come. So we take the best of this bill and we sunset it at the end of 2 years. So if people say that there is no option to going forward as opposed to 6.8, I say, sorry, you're wrong. There is an option, and that's what we've done. We have a 2-year sunset on this bill that would, I think, be at least a reasonable compromise to give us the opportunity to take a hard look at the higher education bill and figure out 2 issues: how we create low-interest loans over a long period of time, and second of all, how we in fact make college more affordable than it currently is. Madam President, let me be a little bit political as I finish my remarks and say this. I respect everybody's point of view, and there are different points of view here. But I think what a lot of Americans are asking themselves, they say, well, let's see. We just had elections in November, and we were told that elections matter. And we had a candidate for President of the United States, Barack Obama, who won a very decisive victory, who ran on the platform of saying, hey, I'm going to stand up for the middle class. I'm going to stand up for working families. We had an election in which Democrats, independents, retained control of the United States Senate, now 54 votes in the Democratic caucus. And almost without exception, Democratic candidates, I ran independent, stand up for working families, stand up for the middle class. So what I don't understand is when you have a Democratic president, a democratically controlled U.S. Senate, why we are producing a bill which is basically a Republican bill, very close to what the House Republicans passed. And as most people know, the House Republicans are perhaps the most conservative majority in the House that we have seen maybe ever. Most conservative body. They say, there's a pretty good bill, we'll accept it. Well, if the most right-wing Congress in American history thinks that this is a pretty good bill, I would hope that many Democrats say maybe there is something wrong with this bill. Maybe we can do something better than that. And the other point that I would make, as I did a moment ago, people have got to understand this. This Senate passed, not passed, a majority of members of the United States Senate voted to keep interest rates at 3.4% for another year. 51 members voted. Now, most people assume that 51 out of 100 is a majority, but we were unable to pass that legislation because of a Republican filibuster. And what we have seen on virtually every single important piece of legislation is that the majority does not rule in the United States Senate. You need to have a supermajority of 60 votes, and the result is legislation like this, which could well end up raising interest rates for students and their families to an absolutely unacceptable level. So, Madam President, let me conclude by saying this. We have a huge crisis in this country. And the crisis is that today, hundreds of thousands of bright young people who have graduated high school are now saying, I would love to go to college. I can do it. I would like to be a professional. I would like to be a doctor. I would like to be a nurse. I would like to do one of many, many professions. I would love to do it. I'm smart enough to do it. I have the drive to do it. I just come from a family which does not have the money to send me to college. So for those hundreds of thousands of young people whose dream it was to go to college, this legislation only makes that situation worse, because it will make college even more unaffordable. And let's be clear, this is a loss not only to those families and to those young people, it is a loss to our country. A couple of months ago, I had the ambassador from Denmark coming to the state of Vermont to do some town meetings with me. And Madam President, you may or may not know the cost of college education in Denmark in terms of out-of-pocket cost. It is zero. It is zero, and it's not just Denmark. There are a number of countries around the world who have the intelligence to understand that the most important thing they can do is invest in their young people. So they say to the young people, you do well in school, regardless of your income, you are going to be able to go to the best colleges we have. Not only best colleges, graduate school, medical school, law school. And your cost will be zero. And you know what? I think that's pretty smart. I think investing in our young people is investing in the future of our country. That's what some colleges do. They make college education free in terms of out-of-pocket cost. Other countries don't go that far. I live an hour away from the Canadian border. They heavily subsidize college. So we're seeing many American kids now going off to find universities and colleges in Canada, where even for people from the United States, college costs are less than they are in the United States alone. In terms of what we are demanding of young people and parents in out-of-pocket expenses, there is no country in the industrialized world that asks more than we do. And the result is that we have seen virtually no gain in the last 30 years in terms of the percentage of our people graduating college. So, Madam President, we have a crisis. It's a crisis which impacts millions of young people, those who have given up on the dream of college, those who are graduating college deeply in debt. It impacts our entire nation, because it is insane to me that we are conceding to other countries around the world and saying, okay, it's okay, you're graduating large numbers of people, you're allowing them to go to college, but we in this great country, we can't do that. It makes no sense to me at all. It is bad for the future of this country, disastrous, bad for our economy, bad for millions of families. The legislation on the floor today only makes a bad situation worse. It is based on variable interest rates. It is, according to the CBO, likely that those interest rates will rise. And in 2018, we're talking about subsidized Stafford 7.25, graduate rates 8.8, plus loans 9.8. Can anybody really come to the floor and tell me this is where we want to go as a country? So we have a bad situation which we have got to address, not make it worse. I want to once again thank all of the senators who have co-sponsored this legislation. Senator Leahy, Senator Wyden, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Schatz, Senator Murphy, Senator Hirono. I want to thank the NEA, the largest educational organization in the country, for their support, the American Federation of Teachers for their support. Madam President, let us stand tall today for the working families of this country who believe in the American dream, and that dream is significantly about the desire to have our young people do better than we have done. That was the dream my parents had, the dream that millions of families had. And an important part of that dream is I am going to work hard as a parent to enable my kid to get a college degree. We are failing millions of families right now. This legislation will make a bad situation worse. We can do better. We can do better. Let's stand with the working families of our country today. Let's reject the underlying amendment and let us pass of the Sanders Amendment. And with that, Madam President, I would yield the floor. I ask unanimous consent the time during the quorum call be charged equally against the bill.
Without objection.
And with that, I note the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.